Welcome back. I gave a very, very positive review for Dune Part 2. It is crushing it at the box office. I'm so excited. As I always say, make good movies and people will come. And people came in spades, and someone even made a moped riding around a sandworm with Paul Atreides cosplay just to see this movie. So everyone's back at the multiplex, and everyone is loving Dune Part 2. But some people are discontented with it, and those are namely book fans, and I wanted to find out exactly why. So I went into the streets and I found a book fan, and she is going to explain why she didn't find Dune Part 2 to be very satisfactory. Introduce yourself.
My name is, well, you've previously seen me as Professor Xer. I am definitely not related to JesterBell here.
No, I found her on the street.
Yeah, I am. There's no relation. There's no physical resemblance of any kind. There's nothing. We're not related 100%. I am just some random person. She found me in Orange County, drove me all the way up here for this. We drove through floods and all the things, and I'm here today with my copy of Dune, and I just want this is not Dune, this is Dune Messiah, which I'm very much looking forward to. But yes, I did have a few let's start with the things that I liked about the movie.
Because Dune Part 2 is a cinematic experience.
I've
seen it twice. I loved it. I'm going to see it a third time. Probably a fourth and fifth time.
She's going to hold a gun to my back and force me to go a second time. Here's the thing, though. I agree. I think that the cinematography, the soundtrack, the costuming, the seriousness of the tone, I appreciated. They did not take... With the few complaints that I do have about the movie, none of what was changed impacted the quality of the characters. There was no character assassination. This was all within the same vein. Everything was the way that the book basically set it up to be. So I was happy about that. I would say my favorite scene was the scene with Fade Routha in the arena, because that was the most accurate to the book, of even down to the little intricacies of how they didn't have one of the prisoners wasn't drugged, and so there in the book there's this relationship between Fade and the Baron, and you're kind of wondering, do they love each other, do they hate each other? It's like one minute they're best friends, the next minute one of them is trying to assassinate the other, and vice versa. But I'm going to take that moment and use that to spring off into the things that I have complaints of, because there were just some really important things that were left out of the movie that I feel like would have helped to explain things better, and would have helped to better develop characters that were very much a huge part of the first movie. And
so just leading into that, I want to say Austin Butler was amazing in this film. I already reviewed the movie. I think that he is, like, people were hyping up to be Heath Ledger's Joker good. We need to stop overusing Dark Knight references. I'm just saying, because you're actually lessening it every time you do that. But anyway, still an amazing performance. One of my favorite actors working today. And I was just in awe at the scene when he comes into the arena, and the acting and the way the Hans Zimmer music.
If I could just interject, one of the complaints about the first movie that a lot of people had was that the soundtrack overpowered the movie. And I think that I love it when this happens, when there are complaints from the audience and you see those things corrected the next time. I made this comment in some of my political commentary at one point. When you see somebody who gets complaints and then they walk it back, they get complaints and they actually take the criticism and they try to fix it, instead of pretending like the mistake isn't there. And I appreciated that Denis Villeneuve actually went ahead and he said, okay, I see what you're saying. The music was a little too overpowering. We'll tone it back just a hair. And I thought that it made a much better balance.
But back to Austin Butler, we're all fawning over him and I'm loving him. But you had some caveats with what they did with him. Could you explain those, please?
Well, first of all, I think Fade is one of my favorite characters from the book, and the book I felt I was just heartbroken when he was killed, because he's such a good character. But obviously it needed to be like the big bad, and he needed to face off with Paul, and he ultimately needed to be defeated by Paul, or that last scene just doesn't hold. But here's my issue. There's so much with the Baron, and again, they set the Baron up in the first movie to be the big bad, and they basically eliminated him from the second half of the movie. They switched you to, now the big bad is Raven, or now the big bad is Fade, but there wasn't really a focus, and now we're focusing on the Emperor there, but there wasn't a focus on overcoming the Baron like there is in the book. And obviously all of these villains are in the book and they are a part of it, but again, they didn't develop any of the others really, except for a little bit of Raven in the first movie. The one that they did develop was the Baron. And so the way that they handled the Baron in this movie is they basically just cast him, Paul comes in and he kills him at the end.
It's throwaway.
And it's a throwaway.
I'd like to add to that because even as I'm 100% a fan of this movie, but that is one thing that on both watches bothered me, that the Baron, after being so built up, is kind of made into pathetic and a throwaway villain in this movie. Like they didn't care about him anymore. And Kelly, I do not know. For some reason, I called you Kelly. Anyway, I don't know if I can say the word on YouTube, but let's just say that anyone who is familiar with the Dune books know that the Baron had bad inclinations towards children, shall we say.
Yes.
And all of that was stripped from the movie.
And the reason why we're not saying it is because YouTube doesn't want us to
Yeah.
use the word, but you guys can, you guys
know what I mean.
Let your imaginations run wild.
But anyway, that was all cut out, and that cuts out a major thing in the book. And we talk about, and I really love this about the movie, that Dune feels very adult, at least very adult for a PG-13 movie. The book could be easily an R-rated film, but I want to know, because they cut all that out, do you think that's why he became kind of throwaway? And also, what huge major thing from the book did cutting out this bad inclination of the Baron mean? Like, what big scene did it have to cut out because of that?
Well, here's basically what happens. The Baron having this inclination towards children in a very, very evil way is a primary focus of the book. It is repeated to the book reader almost to excess, to the point where you're like, I don't really want to know. I don't really want to read about this, which is why it's so satisfying at the end. And for those of you who haven't read the book, please turn away from this video now because I am going to spoil the heck out of it. Paul's sister Aaliyah is born in the book before the end of the story. So and in fact, there are several years that go by, so she's actually a toddler by the time this last battle happens. Now, what happens is, because Jessica drank the water of life to open her mind to the other Reverend Mothers, Aaliyah's mind as a fetus is also open to the other Reverend Mothers, and she basically has an adult mind in a fetus's body, which is quite weird. But the whole they basically took all of that out, again, because it's weird, first of all, and I think because it's kind of complicated and would have added a significant excess of time to the movie. But Aaliyah is born knowing who her father was and knowing all these things about things that have happened in the past, because she has Jessica's memories, she has all the other Reverend Mother's memories. So she knows who the Baron is, and she actually attends the battle, and she ultimately is the one who kills the Baron in this huge moment of, I would say, feminism on a certain level. But just dialing it back to the Fade versus Baron, Fade tries to kill the Baron. Again, sending a child to his quarters to try to kill him because he knows that's his weakness. And so, and that fails, and the Baron punishes Fade in a grotesque way. Again, that scene probably would have been rated R. But so then finally we get to the end, and Aaliyah is basically an outcast. She's referred to as the abomination because a child, or should not be born with these kinds of abilities or memories or capabilities of speech and so on and so forth. And it's still weird because she even talks with a little bit of a lisp, like a 2 or 3-year-old would. So, but she has these adult things coming out of her mouth. So she ultimately attends the battle and is there with the Baron. And I can't exactly remember. It's been a little bit since I think he must pick her up or something.
Oh, but he picks her up and she whirls around, and
yeah, and she calls him grandfather, and she stabs him with the Gom Jabbar like one of the other Reverend Mothers would have done. And it's just such, again, it's a moment of feminism, and it's a moment of anti
negative implications towards children.
Yes, it's we're just gonna have to smooth that over because YouTube will have a field day with that topic. But this is the reason I came out of the movie and Teresa was hyped, and I came out and I just wasn't hyped. Like, I agree, it's a great cinematic masterpiece. I appreciate the
artistry.
care, the artistry, but also the care that who, the people behind this movie obviously had for the source material. They really cared about it. But I describe it as coming out of the Return of the King without the scene where Eowyn kills the Nazgul. It's, can you survive the movie without that? Sure, but you don't want to.
Yeah.
It's such a huge moment, and it's the one of the biggest moments that I was looking forward to seeing.
That
And
that
so I just want to say thank you to Teresa for having, or JesterBell, excuse me. I want to thank her for telling me that my scene wasn't in there, because I would have been legitimately angry to have not seen that in there had I gone in blind, not,
because I watched it and I was just so exhilarated when I came out of it, but I'm like, oh, but they didn't do that one thing, and that was what disappointed me. There is another change from the book I want to talk about in a minute, but first, let's talk about motivations, because I'm reading a little bit of behind the scenes, and one of the things they were talking about is streamlining the movie and how there was so much that they filmed and so much in the books, and Thurfer Hiwatt's character, if I
yeah.
pronounced that right, they had to completely cut him out, and the director didn't want to. So do you think that some of the motivations for cutting some of this stuff out, we know that in the books, Paul and Chani have a son and he is killed. Do you think the motivations for cutting some of this out was streamlining it or making it more PG-13? What do you think?
In the case of Chani and Paul's first son, Leto the second, um, it makes sense that they would cut that out, just because it's confusing. It's confusing in the books because Chani and Paul's second son is also named Leto the second, because the first Leto the second was killed as a 2-year-old in one of these battles. But again, I've said this to many people. It feels like they took the teeth out of a lot of these scenes, because the battle where there's the big attack, Fade comes in and he just ruthlessly attacks the Siege, and a lot of the Fremen are killed and they're mourning. That's the point where Leto the second, as the 2-year-old, should have been killed, and that's what gives that moment the emotional teeth, especially the emotional teeth for Paul and Chani. But that's gone, and so there's just a lot of the bitterness and the sharpness of the feelings that you get in the book are just kind of extracted and taken away. To the point about Hawatt's storyline, basically, I mean, even in the 84 version, they kind of sidestepped his character. It's really interesting in the book, but again, can you get to point A, from point A to point B without it? Yeah, a lot. It's just really fascinating what he is done to him in the book. He's basically given a deal. You help the Harkonnens, and we'll keep you alive, essentially. And what the Baron does is he poisons him, and then gives him the antidote in his food. And if he doesn't eat the food the Harkonnens give him, he will die. Or if he doesn't comply with the Harkonnens, he will die, because they will take the antidote out of his food, and he'll just, it won't be it won't be much longer before he bites the
And yeah,
bucket.
I know that a
He
lot of
kicks the
these.
bucket.
I know what I was saying is I know a lot of these decisions were made to because the movie was already really long. They needed to cut it down. But do you also agree with me that maybe some decisions were made because they wanted to keep it PG-13? And these days, PG-13 movies have been really really tame, and people were surprised at this one because it went further adult than most PG-13 movies, and we can thank Star Wars and Marvel for that. But you think they were just trying to make sure that the movie wasn't going to be R-rated?
I think with the Baron's inclinations, and also with some of the stuff that goes on with Fade, absolutely, because Fade's punishment for attempting to assassinate the Baron is to slaughter all of his concubines in this really ruthless and disgusting scene. I was gonna make another point. Oh, another thing that they cut out from the book was the fact that Gurney and Hawat both thought that Jessica was the one who betrayed them to the Harkonnens the whole time. And so when Gurney comes back with Paul from having found him in the desert, he's ready to kill Jessica. And Hawat the same, and they both find out, through the course of the story, that it wasn't Jessica, that it was the doctor, Dr. Yue, from the beginning. But that's, again, can you live without that? Yes. What I couldn't live without was the fact that they took the Eowyn killing the Nazgul scene out, with Aaliyah killing the guy who does bad things to children.
Okay, I want to talk about one more change from the book, and this was actually the one that was getting the most talk, the changes to Chani's character. I watched it a second time, and I actually liked what they did with Chani's character, having not read the book. I want to know your thoughts on that, no, though, because a lot of people were upset with that and said this was not like her. Other people liked it, though. Some people said not a role in the book. Other people said they made her better than the book. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
First of all, I am of the opinion that there's very little that will ever be better than the source material. There's a reason why the source material is the source material, material for the movie. However, having seen the Hunger Games Battle of Songbirds and Snakes, that's one of the rare exceptions where I would say the movie was actually better than the book because I think it communicated the points better in that movie. But to the point about Dune and with Chani, honestly, Chani doesn't have that much of a role outside of being Paul's lover and outside of being kind of his major obsession. And you could and honestly be the more when Paul like shifts away from Chani versus shifting towards Chani, it's I guess it's kind of a reflection of his focus. But I liked what they did with Chani, making you really did need a character who is a skeptic who can kind of say, because I guess maybe Gurney has a little bit of that in him in the book where he's kind of pushing back on Paul. He's actually the one who says to Paul, your father didn't believe in revenge. Jessica has that line in the movie. But just little things of somebody, pushing back and saying, this might not be a good idea. I liked having that. And given that Chani really doesn't have much of a role other than producing Paul's children, to be honest, in the book, and kind of, she does have an excellent temper that I loved seeing come out in Dune Messiah. So I'm looking forward to seeing that again in Dune Messiah. Honestly, here's the point. I made this point to a fellow YouTuber, Slickmoth. It was, I feel that the way that they constructed Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 was rather than be one story like the book is, they purposely have made the ending of Dune Part 2 vague because they want this to be a trilogy in terms of the movie structure. The book Dune feels like a complete story. You want to read more, but you feel like you finished the story by the time you get to the end of it. The movie does not feel like that. The movie is like, okay, where's Chani going? Are they going to have to now fight, the rest of the empire to conquer it? Like, what's going on here? But you don't feel that at the end of the movie. They purposefully did that, I believe, at the end of this movie because they intend for this to be a trilogy. They intend for Dune Messiah to be, instead of the second book, to be the third part of a trilogy. Which is interesting because Dune Messiah is actually such a short book.
In
In
comparison.
comparison, which Dune really could be 3 or 4 movies by itself if you want to do documentary style. But you made an interesting point earlier about extended editions and deleted scenes. So let's
Yeah,
get into
you
that.
could 100 because we know that they filmed a lot behind the scenes for Dune Part 2, and I say that this is absolutely the kind of movie where you could release an extended edition like they did with Lord of the Rings and that was so successful. Extended editions along with physical media are just kind of fading out, and some of that I would say is exploitation because when they did The Hobbit, they started making extended editions for movies that was basically just shoving in the deleted scenes that no one should see in there. But when you have there's a difference between when you're doing an extended cut and it's stuff that needed to be cut versus you had a lot of material and just had to cut it for time. You could absolutely do that with Dune, and I hope that they do. Even though Denis Villeneuve have some weird hangup of no deleted scenes, like the producers need to get to him and say, we need to do an extended cut of this movie. But I'm still 100% on board with this Dune movies. Could it have had things from the book that would have made it better? Of course, but in terms of just a movie, it is. I don't want to. I know everybody's overusing this term, but it's a cinematic experience. I'm not sitting there in the theater going, I want to go home. I want this to be done. When's the ending going to come? I'm just there enjoying it. I love the atmosphere. I like, because even as we say that they cut it down to be more PG-13, what a lot of people are liking about this, they're saying it respects the audience intelligence. It feels like a smart film that's, thinking about science fiction and these different worlds and how they work and the politics of them. It's sort of like Star Wars was sort of Dune for little kids, and then Dune is Dune for adults. And so that's I really love the movie, and I'm not sure what movie is going to come out this year that can top it. But thank you so much, random bystander, for explaining your thoughts. And will you go see the movie again? Will you watch it again?
Yes, but probably because you'll have a gun to my
Yeah,
back.
you need to watch it. You need to enjoy it. She listens to the soundtrack all the time. But thank you all for watching this. And what did you think of Dune? Are you a book fan? Were you disappointed by the movie, or are you just a movie fan and you loved it? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you, patrons, as always. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos, and we will see you guys next time. Wave.